Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Gopi Janavallabha Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Girivaradhari Jaya Yashodhanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yashodhanandana Jaya Braja Janaranjana Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Yamuna Tiravanachari Jaya Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe Jaya Radha Madhava Radhe Jai Jaya Prabhupada Jai Jaya Prabhupada Nitai Gaura Haribo Haribo Nitai Gaura Haribo Shri Radha Madhav ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur Bhaktavind ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we'll continue glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. I was thinking to start with a verse, and then we could read other things as well. There's a chapter in the Nectar of Devotion that's also something very nice that I want to read. But I guess we'll start with the verse. So possibly someone has already covered this verse, but I thought we'd starting with this one. The other day, my mother covered the first two verses and didn't get to the third one. So if no one else covered it, then it's a good sequence. So please repeat after me. This is Srimad-Bhagavatam 1:1-3. Nigamakalpatoror galitam phalam. Nigamakalpatoror galitam phalam. Shukad mahad amrita dravya samyutam. Sukhamukhad amrita dravya samyutam. Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. Mahor aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Mahor aho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam. Nigamakalpataror galitam phalam. Shukamukad amrita dravya samyutam. Shukamukad amrita dravya samyutam. Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. Pibata bhagavatam rasamalayam. Muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. Muhuraho rasika bhuvi bhavuka. So just a little history on this verse, why this verse remains sort of stuck in my mind. Many years ago, about maybe 10 years ago, my parents and I, and I think it was just the three of us. My brother was not there that time with us, but he accompanied on other trips. We went to visit the four dhams, this Char Dham, very famous in India, Badrinath, Kedarnath, Gangotri, and Jamnotri. The first time in our life, and the only time we went. It's a very dangerous journey up high into the Himalayas. And the first place where we visit is Badrinath. Badrinath is Badrikasram. It is the place of Naranarayan Rishi. It's the place of Vyasadeva, where Vyasadeva resided and wrote the Vedas. So it's a very, very, very holy place, high up in the Himalayas. And when just going up so high in the Himalayas, already you feel, I mean, it's very, very breathtaking. It's just like you already feel you're in the heavens, because you're actually walking in the clouds. It's so high up in the mountains that the clouds are there. You're walking in the clouds. You can see the clouds in front of you. So very beautiful. On the way to Badrikasram, there's very thin roads up the mountains. And if you look on the side, every kilometer or so, you'll find a bus or a car that's fallen into the canyon. When we were going up there, then just like 20 cars ahead of us, on a passing where there's a waterfall, and the waterfall comes down the mountain and goes over the road. There's a group of people standing there because a bus had just fallen into one of the barges, one of the canyons. So for some, it's their final journey. And our own experience going there was that we didn't fall into the canyon. And that's why I'm still here giving this class. But during the journey, which was like a 2-week journey, at one point, the brakes in the sumo, the Tata Sumo that we had rented, and the driver also who was there with the car, the brakes failed. So still remember, it was parked. Luckily, it failed when it was parked and they were just turning on. And the truck started to roll down the pathway, the road. So it was a very, you could say, very, you were praying to Krishna at every moment. So at that point, we kept on going, and finally we reached Badrikasram. And in Badrinath, there's a cave there. And it's described in that specific cave. That cave is there because that's where Vyasadeva wrote the Srimad-Bhagavatam. So there's many places there. There's the main temple, and there's all these different places of pilgrimage in Badrikasram. And you see these great yogis there. There's it's freezing cold all year long. Freezing cold, but especially in the winters, even the locals go down. There's no one living there. There's no town there. There's only a temple there. And the temple closes, the priest goes down with the deity for 6 months out of the year when the winter season is there. Because the snow is like 8 feet, it's like impossible to live there. But there'll be some yogis, and the locals will mention this it's a well-known fact. There's some yogis there who live all year long up there in Badrikasram. because they're yogis and they just wear a kopan and they walk around in the snow barefoot. And they can be seen sometimes here and there. They can be seen only to very fortunate souls. Just like there's that verse, I'm forgetting that, that when Lord Krishna appears, then Nanda Maharaj invites Garga Muni to do the name-giving ceremony of Krishna. And when he invites him, then Nanda Maharaj tells Garga Muni that souls like you cannot be seen by those whose senses are not controlled. Souls like you are not visible to ordinary people. So the fact that we are seeing you today means that we are very, very fortunate. We have performed great austerities to be able to see you. So even to see a great soul is a great honor. It's due to great penance and austerities that, or some good fortune, or just their causeless mercy, due to which we are able to see them. So these yogis, they're yogis, not, like Lord Chaitanya's, you could say bhaktas, where they freely distribute their mercy. They are mystic yogis, so they don't show themselves. The real genuine ones, they're not looking for donations or followers. So they are meditating there in Badrikasram in the snow. And they can be seen walking here and there. And in Badrikasram, amongst this freezing cold, there are some hot springs. That's the amazing thing, how Mother Nature, how the Lord, the Himalayas, they provide a way that the human beings can sustain themselves anywhere. Living beings can be sustained anywhere. So in this freezing cold where there's ice and snow everywhere, you'll find these hot water pools of boiling hot water. And the locals, many times, the way they eat, because it's so cold, there's nothing there, they'll take rice, put it in a bag, and they'll put it in the hot water. It's boiling hot water coming from the earth in this, like they made this stone kind of swimming pool. They put it in there. And after 10 minutes, the rice is cooked. So it's a natural fire, natural heat there. So there is this one cave, a very beautiful cave, somewhat large, but not too large, enough that a person can barely stand. And in that cave, Vyasadeva wrote the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And there's a priest who sits in that cave. And 12 hours a day, all these visitors are coming, they offer their obeisances, they offer some, 1 or 2 rupees or something. But 12 hours a day, he's reciting this one verse. Nigamakalpatoror galitam phalam. Shukad mahad amrita dravya samyutam. It's almost like he's been hypnotized. It's like we were sitting there for about half an hour, and the whole time he just again and again reciting this verse. Nigamakalpatoror galitam phalam. Shukad mahad amrita dravya samyutam. Just a glorification of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. You can see he's been touched by that place. He's a great mystic yogi who is absorbed in the mercy of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So let's see what this verse means. Nigama, the Vedic literatures, Talpataro, the desire tree, Galitam, fully matured, Phalam, fruit, Shukha, Sri Shukadeva Goswami, the original speaker of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Mukhat, from the lips of Amrita, nectar, Drava, semi-solid and soft, and therefore easily swallowable. Samyutam, perfect in all respects. Pibata, do relish it. Bhagavatam, the book dealing in the science of the eternal relation with the Lord. Rasam, juice, that which is relishable. Alayam, until liberation, or even in a liberated condition. Muhu, always. Aho, oh, rasika, those who are full in the knowledge of mellows. Bhuvi, on the earth. Bhavuka, expert and thoughtful men. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad-Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Once again, O expert and thoughtful men, relish Srimad-Bhagavatam, the mature fruit of the desire tree of Vedic literatures. It emanated from the lips of Sri Shukadev Goswami. Therefore, this fruit has become even more tasteful, although its nectarian juice was already relishable for all, including liberated souls. Purport. In the two previous shlokas, it has been definitely proven that Srimad-Bhagavatam is a sublime literature which surpasses all other Vedic scriptures due to its transcendental qualities. It is transcendental to all mundane activities and mundane knowledge. In this shloka, it is stated that Srimad-Bhagavatam is not only a superior literature, but is the ripened fruit of all Vedic literatures. In other words, it is a cream of all Vedic knowledge. Considering all this, patient and submissive hearing is definitely essential. With great respect and attention, one should receive the message and lessons imparted by the Srimad-Bhagavatam. The Vedas are compared to the desire tree because they contain all things knowable by man. They deal with mundane necessities as well as spiritual realization. The Vedas contain regulated principles of knowledge covering social, political, religious, economic, military, medicinal, chemical, physical, and metaphysical subject matter, and all that may be necessary to keep the body and soul together. Above and beyond all this are specific directions for spiritual realization. Regulative knowledge involves the gradual raising of the living entity to the spiritual platform. And the highest spiritual realization is knowledge that the personality of Godhead is the reservoir of all spiritual tastes or rasas. Every living entity, beginning with Brahma, the firstborn living being within the material world, down to the insignificant ant, desires to relish some sort of taste derived from sense perceptions. These sensual pleasures are technically called rasas. Such rasas are of different varieties. In the revealed scriptures, the following 12 varieties of rasas are enumerated. 1. Raudra, anger. 2. Adbhuta, wonder. 3. Shingara, conjugal love. 4. Hasya, comedy. 5. Vira, chivalry. 6. Daya, mercy. 7. Dasya, servitorship. 8. Sakya, fraternity. 9. Bhayanaka, horror. 10. Bhibhatsa, shock. 11. Shanta, neutrality. And 12. Vatsalya, parenthood. The sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. Primarily, such signs of love are manifest in adoration, service, friendship, parental affection, and conjugal love. And when these 5 are absent, love is present indirectly in anger, wonder, comedy, chivalry, fear, shock, and so on. For example, when a man is in love with a woman, the rasa is called conjugal love. But when such love affairs are disturbed, there may be wonder, anger, shock, or even horror. It's just like some people, they like horror movies. So it's a rasa to be horrified, which is quite shocking, which is quite wondrous, but some people like them. Sometimes love affairs between two persons culminate in ghastly murder scenes. They love each other, that's why they murder each other. Material world, so unfortunate. Such rasas are displayed between man and man and between animal and animal. There's no possibility of an exchange of rasa between a man and an animal, or between a man and any other species of living beings within the material world. The rasas are exchanged between members of the same species. But as far as the spirit souls are concerned, they are one qualitatively with the Supreme Lord. Therefore, the rasas were originally exchanged between the spiritual living being and the spiritual whole, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The spiritual exchange, or rasa, is fully exhibited in spiritual existence between living beings and the Supreme Lord. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is therefore described in the Shruti mantras, Vedic hymns, as the fountainhead of all rasas. When one associates with the Supreme Lord and exchanges one's constitutional rasa with the Lord, then the living being is actually happy. These Shruti mantras indicate that every living being has its constitutional position, which is endowed with a particular type of rasa, to be exchanged with the personality of Godhead. In the liberated condition only, this primary rasa is experienced in full. In the material existence, the rasa is experienced in the perverted form, which is temporary. And thus the rasas of the material world are exhibited in the material form of Raudra, anger, and so on. Therefore, one who attains full knowledge of these different rasas, which are the basic principles of activities, can understand the false representations of the original rasas, which are reflected in the material world. The learned scholar seeks to relish the real rasa in the spiritual form. In the beginning, he desires to become one with the Supreme. Thus, less intelligent transcendentalists cannot go beyond this conception of becoming one with the Supreme Whole without knowing of the different rasas. In this shloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Srimad-Bhagavatam due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. Once again, this sentence. In this shloka, it is definitely stated that spiritual rasa, which is relished even in the liberated stage, can be experienced in the literature of the Srimad-Bhagavatam due to its being the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge. By submissively hearing this transcendental literature, one can attain the full pleasure of his heart's desire. But one must be very careful to hear the message from the right source. Srimad-Bhagavatam is exactly received from the right source. It was brought by Narad Muni from the spiritual world and given to his disciple, Sri Vyasadeva. The latter in turn delivered the message to his son, Srila Shukadeva Goswami. And Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. Oh, sorry, I missed it. The latter in turn delivered the message to Shukadeva Goswami, and Srila Shukadeva Goswami delivered the message to Maharaj Parikshit just 7 days before the king's death. Srila Shukadeva Goswami was a liberated soul from his very birth. He was liberated even in the womb of his mother, and he did not undergo any sort of spiritual training from his birth. He was spiritual training after his birth. At birth, no one is qualified, neither in the mundane nor in the spiritual sense. But Srila Shukadeva Goswami, due to his being a perfectly liberated soul, did not have to undergo an evolutionary process for spiritual realization. Yet, despite his being a completely liberated person, situated in the transcendental position above the three modes, he was attracted to this transcendental rasa of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is adorned by liberated souls who sing Vedic hymns. The Supreme Lord's pastimes are more attractive to liberated souls than to mundane people. He is of necessity not impersonal, because it is only possible to carry on transcendental rasa with a person. In the Srimad-Bhagavatam, the transcendental pastimes of the Lord are narrated, and the narration is systematically depicted by Srila Shukadeva Goswami. Thus, the subject matter is appealing to all classes of persons, including those who seek liberation and those who seek to become one with the Supreme Whole. In Sanskrit, the parrot is also known as shuka when a ripened fruit is cut by the red beaks of such birds. Its sweet flavor is enhanced. The Vedic fruit, which is mature and ripe in knowledge, is spoken through the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who is compared to the parrot, not for his ability to recite the Bhagavatam exactly as he heard it from his learned father, but for his ability to present the work in a manner that would appeal to all classes of men. The subject matter is so presented through the lips of Srila Shukadeva Goswami that any sincere listener that hears submissively can at once relish transcendental tastes, which are distinct from the perverted tastes of the material world. The ripened fruit is not dropped all of a sudden from the highest planet of Krishna Loka. Rather, it has come down carefully through the chain of disciplic succession without change or disturbance. Foolish people who are not in the transcendental disciplic succession commit great blunders by trying to understand the highest transcendental rasa, known as the rasa dance, without following in the footsteps of Shukadeva Goswami, who presents this fruit very carefully by stages of transcendental realization. One should be intelligent enough to know the position of Srimad-Bhagavatam by considering personalities like Shukadeva Goswami, who deals with the subject so carefully. This process of disciplic succession of the Bhagavatam school suggests that in the future also Srimad-Bhagavatam has to be understood from a person who is factually a representative of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. A professional man who makes a business out of reciting the Bhagavatam illegally is certainly not a representative of Shukadeva Goswami. Such a man's business is only to earn his livelihood. Therefore, one should refrain from hearing the literatures of such professional men. Such men usually go to the most confidential part of the literature without undergoing the gradual process of understanding this grave subject. They usually plunge into the subject matter of the rasa dance, which is misunderstood by the foolish class of men. Some of them take this to be immoral, while others try to cover it up by their own stupid interpretations. They have no desire to follow in the footsteps of Srila Shukadeva Goswami. One should conclude, therefore, that the serious student of the rasa should receive the message of Bhagavatam in the chain of disciplic succession. From Srila Shukadeva Goswami, who describes the Bhagavatam from its very beginning, and not whimsically to satisfy the mundaner who has very little knowledge in transcendental science. Srimad-Bhagavatam is so carefully presented that a sincere and serious person can at once enjoy the ripened fruit of Vedic knowledge simply by drinking the nectarian juice through the mouth of Shukadeva Goswami or his bona fide representative. Om Gyanam Timirandhasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadahmayam Tadati Swa Plantikam. So this purport, Srila Prabhupada is talking about rasa. The entire purport is about rasa, which is this is the subject matter of the Srimad-Bhagavatam. This Bhagavatam, the reason Srila Prabhupada, the whole purport is dedicated to rasa, is because the whole Bhagavatam is nothing other than rasa. The whole Bhagavatam is filled with rasa. Pibata Bhagavatam rasam alayam. It is the storehouse of all rasa. So in this world, Srila Prabhupada is making the point, which he spends quite a bit of time on, that in this world, we are experiencing so many rasas. And he mentions all 12, interestingly, not just the 5. Because in this material world, we experience the 5, but along with all these others, like chivalry, anger, horror, these are also rasas. They are certain emotions that people experience. And they all exist in different ways. So in this material world, we are enjoying these rasas, the rasa of friendship, parental, conjugal, and each one is special. It has its unique mellow. It's in reciprocation with the unique persons. And this is our life. Right? We're searching after this in this world. People, all the movies and the films, right? They're all dedicated. 99% of them are dedicated on finding the perfect love, right? Finding that rasa of conjugal love. Most Western society focuses on this. This is the primary rasa in the West. And everyone is searching after these mellows, this rasa, which Prabhupada says this very interesting sentence in this purport. He said, they all culminate in love, right? They're all different flavors of love. And the question is, where do these different rasas come from? All these rasas are there present in this world, but they are present in the Supreme Lord, in the spiritual world. And therefore, we experience the perverted reflection in this world. And therefore, we experience all these rasas in this world. And another thing that's very interesting is that he mentions all 12 of these rasas. Srila Prabhupada mentions them and says that the sum total of all these rasas is called affection or love. So even this rasa of horror, this rasa of anger, even these, Prabhupada is saying, are rasas of love. And that reminded me of a sentence that Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj said, that every expression in this world is a call for love. Every expression in this world is someone seeking love. Ultimately, right? If someone is very angry also, it's a call for love. They have not been loved, or they're missing the love, and therefore they are behaving in that way. Or their love is broken or something like this. So Prabhupada says that they're all forms of love. So in the spiritual world where it's not perverted, where all these rasas are sources of great happiness and enjoyment, they're all forms of expressing love for Krishna. Just like Prabhupada says that there's only actually one rasa in the spiritual world, that is of service. But every devotee is thinking that I can serve Krishna as a parent. I can serve Krishna as a lover. I can serve Krishna as a friend. And therefore that rasa of dasya rasa, that rasa of service manifests itself in sakya, vatsalya, all these things. So in the same way, all the rasas, all the emotions are just emotions of love. The devotees are trying to love Krishna through the chivalrous rasa. And the example of that is Bhishmadev. The devotees are trying to love the Lord through this mood of anger, as expressed, we were discussing yesterday, expressed by Srimati Radharani towards Krishna. The devotees of the Lord are trying to love Krishna by this expression of horror. When these big demons all of a sudden appear, Agasura, Bakasura, then sometimes the cowboys are horrified by them, by their ghastly faces. And they're horrified, although they're very confident of their love for Krishna, of the protection of Krishna, but they express this emotion of horror just to express their love for Krishna, just to increase their Krishna's love for them and their love for Krishna. So they're all different flavors of this love. And so in the spiritual world, these rasas find their perfection. And all these rasas, because the Bhagavatam is nothing else other than the descriptions of the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, all these rasas are present in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. One can relish all of them, every one of them, in the pages of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So, like Srila Prabhupada has told us in so many different ways in different times, that Krishna is present in his narrations, right? So, if someone tells a story about someone in this material world, they tell the story, but the persons are not actually present in those stories. But in the case of Krishna's pastimes and narrations of Krishna's pastimes, Krishna is actually present there. Just like when we read the Krishna book, then the advanced soul, when reading it, will actually experience Krishna's pastimes, like Srila Prabhupada did when reading the Krishna book. I was just reading a story of Shama Sundar Prabhu describing his experience with Srila Prabhupada, serving Srila Prabhupada. He was describing how when Prabhupada would describe a pastime in the spiritual world, he was there. He was right there. Actually, I have it right here. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked, but here, I'll just read a small snippet of this. But I don't want to lose the thought. We'll come back to this. So Krishna's pastimes, Krishna's actually there, present in his pastimes. So when we are reading the narrations of the pastimes of the Lord and his devotees, particularly actually his devotees in the Srimad-Bhagavatam, then one can actually relish that rasa. One can actually relish that feeling that the devotee is feeling towards Krishna. So we will not actually maybe see Krishna and the devotee there kind of, talking to each other in the page, like if we were to see them face to face. But in reading it, one can not actually see them, but one can actually feel the rasa, can feel the feeling that they are feeling. And when we read it again and again, then we become more and more in tune with that feeling. We experience that feeling more and more. Those feelings deepen. And when we experience and understand all these rasas that are present in the spiritual world and that then manifest themselves in a perverted way in the material world, then we can also understand the material world. We can understand the different workings or trappings of this material world. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada said in one place, he says that by reading Srimad-Bhagavatam, one can understand every psychological situation in the world. So all the psychological situations that are happening, between, different members of society, one can understand it all. Because the Bhagavatam specializes in showing us how the devotees of the Lord in the material world, how do they deal with all the different situations that arrive to us in this material world. Just like we have the story of Sati and Shiva, right? And Lord Shiva is the son-in-law, and Daksha is her father and Lord Shiva's father-in-law. And the situation is a very standard material situation. It's one of, prestige, honor between the in-laws and the reputation and of different members, and of her father not respecting her husband. We find the story of Dhruva and his brother, Uttam. This is the case of stepbrothers, or even just brothers, being envious of one another, of competing with one another, having some feelings of competition from one another. And we see how Dhruva Maharaj responds to it in a very Krishna conscious way, how his mother responds to it and tells him that go out and find the Supreme Lord, because the Supreme Lord can help you. No one else can. And that is a way to solve the situation, by pleasing the Lord. Rather than finding revenge, go and please the Lord. And by pleasing the Lord, you can gain anything in this world. So, so through the lives of these devotees, through the lives of these great personalities, we understand all the situations in this material world, all the different rasas, and we understand how these liberated souls responded to those situations. So Srila Prabhupada says that one can understand every psychological situation in this world, meaning one can understand every rasa. Every situation is a particular rasa by reading Srimad-Bhagavatam. So what to speak of spiritual, what to speak of spiritual rasa, even, or rather I should say, what to speak of material rasa, even spiritual rasas, one can feel by reading this Srimad-Bhagavatam. Because why? Because it is the most, it contains all the rasas that are present in this material world. So I was going to read you this, how Krishna is actually present in the narrations of the devotees, how the devotees are actually experiencing Krishna in narrations of his qualities and activities. So this is Shama Sundar Prabhu's memory of Srila Prabhupada, his remembrance. And it tells us how when we read the narrations of the Bhagavatam about Krishna, about his devotees, that we should not think that we cannot enter into them by reading them, that we cannot, when we read them, we should actually feel, we should know that they're actually happening. So he says, Shruta Kirti Prabhu, Prabhupada's massage in the evening was the most personal, intimate time to be with Prabhupada. The lights were out, the room was dark. There would be some light from wherever, and no one ever entered Prabhupada's room while he received his evening massage. No one ever came into his quarters, into Prabhupada's quarters. So it was just him and his servant. So as I was massaging, Prabhupada all of a sudden said, I like the cowherd boys very much. When he would speak in the evening, it was nothing but nectar, always nectar. So I just continued, never stopped massaging. And he was looking at the picture, a big painting on the wall at the foot of his bed. And he was just looking into it. So I looked and I realized he was looking at this picture of Krishna and Balaram. And they were just young boys, 8 years old. And with them, there were thousands of cowherd boys and calves. And they were just in the forest of Vrindavan. So Prabhupada was looking at them. So I'm massaging. Then he said, every day Krishna and Balaram would go into the forest in Vrindavan. Before they would go, their mothers would make lunches, prepare tiffins for them. I'm just shaking my head. Prabhupada is speaking very softly. Prabhupada is just there, right there inside that scene, and he is speaking about it. He says, I like them very much. When Prabhupada talked, he would just bring you, he would transport you right there. So he said, Krishna's mother, Yashoda, she would make very nice tiffin, and in it there would be puri, halwa, kachori, and laddu. And the other cowherd boys, their mothers, were not so opulent, so their tiffins would have chapati, rice, sabji, like that. So Krishna's tiffin had the goodies, and theirs would be more like rice, dal, and sabji. And then he said, then they would go and they would play all day, and they didn't have the cows. They're just little boys, so they would have the calves. The calves were with them. Then finally, they would stop for lunch. Sometimes one of the cowherd boys would steal Krishna's lunch and begin throwing it around. They would play keep away with Krishna. I'm just massaging the whole time. He said, finally, the cowherd boys would throw their lunch to Krishna, and they would sit down with his lunch, and they would eat puri, halwa, kachori, and laddu. And Krishna would sit with them, and he would eat the rice, chapati, and sabji. He was smiling so brightly, and then he stopped, and I'm still massaging. Then said, I just want to go back to the spiritual world and eat kachori and laddu with Krishna. Then he closed his eyes and didn't say anything more, and I just kept massaging. So it was something very rare. So this is describing how why Prabhupada's commentary and his Krishna book, his summary of the 10th canto, why it's so special. Because he could actually understand that these narrations of Srimad-Bhagavatam are actually alive. Krishna is actually present in these narrations. And he could actually see Krishna while relating these pastimes. He could actually relish them. And so because we are receiving the Srimad-Bhagavatam, first from Shukadev Goswami, and then from Srila Prabhupada, therefore, by their mercy, we can also start to relish these rasas. We have no right or experience to have a rasa with Krishna, to know our rasa with Krishna at this time. But through these liberated souls and through the association provided in the Bhagavatam, we relish those moods. Just like we see that, that Queen Kunti is in Hastinapur, and she is not in the same rasa as Mother Yashoda or the gopis. Yet in her prayers, in that verse, Gopya Vito Kritagasidama Tabad, Yate Dashashu Kalilanjara Sambramaksham, Vakram Niniya Bhayabhavanya Sitasya, and then I forget the last line. She mentions how she's aware of Krishna's relationship with Mother Yashoda and how she's bewildered by that relationship. In the same way, Bhishmadev, in his prayers to Krishna when he's giving up his body, he describes how the gopis and residents of Vrindavan are the most fortunate living beings. And he's in the chivalrous rasa, but he does not, he's not in the conjugal rasa or something like this. So regardless of which rasa they are in, they're aware and relishing to some degree these rasas in Vrindavan amongst the residents of Braja. So how is that? Because all of them, Prabhupada said, they've heard narrations about Krishna. They've heard the pastimes about Krishna, and therefore, though they're not in that rasa, they're experiencing these rasas. They are relishing them through these narrations. And in this purport, Prabhupada writes how every living entity, every soul has an eternal rasa with the Lord. So some of us may not be, in Madhurya Ras or Vatsalya Ras. We may be a blade of grass, if we're fortunate, in Vrindavan, or we may not even be in Vrindavan, who knows? And that's all a very, difficult subject matter. But whatever it is, we don't have to worry about that, because through the pages of Srimad-Bhagavatam, we can experience all of them. By reading, once a person is qualified, the 10th canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, one can relish the activities between Krishna and the gopis, the feelings, the mood between the Krishna and the gopis. So therefore, the Bhagavatam provides, it's the reservoir of all rasa. It provides this highest rasas to everyone in this world. Now, another point that is mentioned here, and I just want to quickly cover, is how the Srimad-Bhagavatam is a mature fruit of Vedic literatures. So there's so many Vedic literatures. And just the other day, Lakshmikant Prabhu was mentioning about how the commentaries on the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And it's such a nice point, because there's so many Puranas, 108 Puranas, of them 18 principal, and most of them don't have any commentaries. And what to speak of commentaries, most of them are not even translated from Sanskrit to any other language. They're just there. But the Srimad-Bhagavatam has 81 extant commentaries, meaning extant means that are there with us today, 81. And many, many more. Who knows how many more were actually there and have been lost to time. But every person who was a true connoisseur of spiritual life, every acharya wrote a commentary on the Srimad-Bhagavatam or read Srimad-Bhagavatam, relished Srimad-Bhagavatam. In one lecture, I was just hearing Prabhupada was saying that how true education meant reading Srimad-Bhagavatam. One knew that one was actually educated, one actually had knowledge if they had read Srimad-Bhagavatam. From Bhagavatam, we get the knowledge about how to advance in spiritual life. In India, even to this day, for Sanskrit scholars, the Bhagavatam Sanskrit is considered the best in all the worlds, in every literature. So the best Sanskrit scholars, they are tested finally by the verses of the Srimad-Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam is considered to have the most beautiful, sublime, and intricate Sanskrit, and therefore it's considered the test for Sanskrit scholars. There's one great scholar, Nrsimhacharya. He's no longer living. He passed away recently, and he was considered India's greatest Sanskritist. He received the Sanskrit award from the President of India, and the President of India gave him the award, greatest Sanskritist. He was actually a devotee of Hayagriva. So his Sanskrit knowledge was, because he was very intelligent, but it wasn't just, he didn't have that knowledge just, he was so good, it was more than just bookish knowledge. He had a blessing. And he was a devotee of Hayagriva, who, as you know, spoke the Vedas. He had Hayagriva deity. And he was a devout Sri Vaishnava from South India. His Nrsimhacharya, his name was Nrsimhacharya. So because he was the world's best, he was invited to Oxford as a visiting Sanskrit scholar, and he came there. We had the chance to meet him there and take some lessons from him, though I didn't take much from him. I was just starting at that time, and he was just leaving at that time. But he gave some lessons, and he was a Sri Vaishnava. He knew that we were Gaudiya Vaishnavas. And for Sri Vaishnavas, the main Purana is the Vishnu Purana, because they're devotees of Vishnu, not the Bhagavad Purana. But even Nrsimhacharya, he said repeatedly on many occasions, he said that the test of a Sanskritist is the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And he said that there's no Sanskrit in this world that is as beautiful as the Bhagavatam. And particularly, he said, the 10th canto, just on the basis of grammar, he was saying. So it is the fruit of all Vedic literatures. Even just linguistically, there's no work that's more beautiful among the Vedic literature than the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And he said how he confirmed that if a person could understand the deep meaning of the verses of the Bhagavatam, then they were confirmed as a great Sanskrit scholar. And most people, this is why they actually, the nature of Bhagavatam is that its Sanskrit is such that it's very easy to misunderstand its message also. And this is why Prabhupada mentioned this in the purport. For many, many generations, centuries, people have been misunderstanding its message. And it's also why Srila Prabhupada, this was his life's work, why he spent his life translating the Bhagavatam many, many years, because even amongst all the learned people, Bhagavatam is the authority. And Prabhupada was giving the true understanding, the true message, the true meaning of this Bhagavatam. Now, here it's said that how Bhagavatam is the fruit of all Vedic literatures. So the Vedic literature is compared to a tree. And the hallmark of a tree is its fruit. So the gift of a tree to the world is the fruit. And therefore the gift of the Vedic literatures is this Srimad-Bhagavatam. Now, the fruit contains the essence of the whole tree. In the same way, Bhaktivinoda Thakur has written how the Bhagavatam is giving us the highest knowledge, the highest rasa, as described here. But simultaneously, the Bhagavatam not just is giving us the highest knowledge, but it actually contains all knowledge. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur goes through and he proves it, that how even if all the other books in the world are lost and only the Bhagavatam is left, how nothing would be lost because all forms of knowledge are actually in the Srimad-Bhagavatam. And how does he go about proving this? He says, well, there's 6 systems of knowledge. in Indian philosophy, there's 6 systems, and this is all of knowledge. You're a learned person. Prabhupada also writes this in the Bhagavatam. When you know the 6 darshans, the 6 systems of knowledge, and what are they? They are well, I won't go in any specific order. There's Mimamsaka, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, and Vedanta, right? So Nyaya and Vaisheshika, we'll start with Vaisheshika. Vaisheshika is the Indian science. It's atomism, right? It talks about atoms, and this is all of Western science also. So that is a very important field of knowledge. It's the knowledge about, it's literally the knowledge about the material world. It's the Vedic physics, how this world has come together. It's atomism. So we find Vaisheshika philosophy in the 2nd canto of Srimad-Bhagavatam, where it describes, the atom and the calculation of time from the atom, which is very amazing. It's like, it gives the definition of atomic time as the time it takes for a ray of sunlight to pass over an atom. So that's atomic time. It's the shortest period of time. And even modern scientists, they talk about atomic time. And the atom is the smallest building block. So that's Vaisheshika in the 2nd canto. Then you have chemistry, that's Sankhya, and that's present in the 3rd canto, Sankhya philosophy, the 25 elements. Then you have Nyaya and logic. That's there throughout the Srimad-Bhagavatam. It presents the highest logic. It's full of logic. The discourses are just so, deep, logical. Then you have Nyaya, Vaisheshika, then yoga. And that's also present there in the 3rd canto. It's present there in many different cantos, where the entire eightfold yoga is described, and it's described in the context of bhakti, how the devotee moves through these 8 stages of yoga, culminating in samadhi, which Kapila describes as the shivering of the body's hair standing on end, tears flowing from one's eyes, all the things of an ecstatic devotee of the Lord, which Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu taught also. So basically, it's the yoga system, the original yoga system. Then you have Mimamsa, which is the words of the Vedas, right? The Vedic literature, the eternal word of the Veda. And that you find in the Bhagavatam, you find that is the Purusha Shukta. The Purusha Shukta is there. So we got Mimamsaka, Yoga, Sankhya, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, and finally Vedanta. Vedanta, that is, Bhagavatam is itself the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So all 6 systems of knowledge are present within the Bhagavatam. And modern scholars also tell us that it synthesizes these 6 in a way that we find nowhere else. It brings them together. It brings all this Vedic knowledge, which is so diverse and, put apart, in a way that is just so perfect. One can understand it all together in such a nice way. So this is called Nigama Kalpatarru. This is the fruit of Vedic knowledge, because it gives the highest knowledge, which is love for Krishna, but it also in the process gives all knowledge. And so many times, therefore, Prabhupada has said that therefore, if one reads the Bhagavatam, he is more than PhD. He is the most learned person in this world, because all knowledge is there. And then, of course, we know there's astronomy there. There's, all the planetary systems. There's, there's moral teachings there. There's spiritual teachings there. Everything is there, all in relationship with Krishna. So I will stop here. It's 8:30, and I think I went a bit too long. If anyone has any comments, corrections, questions.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please accept my humble obeisances, Prabhu. All glories to Sri Prabhupada. I have actually about 3 or 4 things, Prabhu. I hope I
You're,
don't take time from others.
you are Rasika yourself. That's why you have all this always, always. Yes, please.
With your blessings, Prabhu. So it's very brilliant, Prabhu. The point that is coming out from this verse that it's Bhagavatam gives the rasa in the present situation for any emotion, whether you're feeling good or not good, happy, unhappy, crying, and all those things. Actually, it was amazing. Someone was crying a lot, elderly person. He called and crying a lot just 2 days back. And then he opened Bhagavatam, read the second canto, 1 through 11 verses from the first chapter. He got transformed. He became happier.
Really? Wow.
So sweet. And this verse is also bringing that the core missing point, that's a exchange of that emotion with Krishna, and how Bhagavatam also takes one experience not only from this world, but it also takes to the experience in the spiritual world. That was like very nice, very sweet.
Wow. Yes. Yes. No, that is. Thank you for that comment, Prabhu. Yes.
Yeah. And the second one is from the Bhagavatam leadership, there is a plan for 100,000 sets. I think Vaisheshika Prabhu gave in 3-4 years or 5, something like that. I think 3 more years or something is there. So, I think everyone, it was just proposed last year. Last year it was like 40,000, something like 40,000 sets, something like that. So I think he gave 5 years. By 5 years, we should hit the 100,000.
Wow. Wow. So glorious. So wonderful. Oh, Jai.
So,
Prabhu, if I can make just one comment on this.
Yes, Prabhu.
One time the devotees, they said, when Prabhupada was present on the planet, they said that that distributing books is in the mood of the gopis. They're like gopis. And when other devotees heard this, they're a little shocked, and they thought, well, this is kind of exaggeration, and book distribution is so important, and now all of a sudden they're gopis and it's in the mood of the gopis. So they took this to Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada confirmed, and he said, yes, book distribution is in the mood of the gopis, because we are distributing this love of Krishna to everyone, and that's the mood of the gopis. And I was thinking how it's related so much with this verse, that the Bhagavatam has all the rasas present in it. It's even Rasa Leela is described in it. All the Vrindavan is described in it. And by giving the Bhagavatam to others, which actually the Gita also doesn't have, right? It doesn't have descriptions of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan. By giving Bhagavatam to others, we are participating in this work of the gopis. We're giving love for Krishna to others. So yeah, it's a very nice thing.
So hearing the discussion on this verse, it just triggered a couple of thoughts. One thought is, I'm thinking we'll have the goal of 1,108 books from Nepal. Maybe possibly do 3,000, something like that. And the other thought is, we will have some public events, some public festivals, and some we can have presentations by you. So just the glories of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So we'll gear up for that. We'll try to prepare ourselves for a public functions like that, and we'll do a mass distribution. 50 sets, 100 sets, and so on, Prabhu.
But that's a very nice idea. So like a big function, like call a lot of people. I see.
Yeah, like we go to communities, something like that, give a presentation, and then yeah, I mean, things are evolving, Prabhu. So that's the second thing. And the third one is you have been studying Srimad-Bhagavatam, from very early years. So it must have been very ecstatic, just going back and forth, why like this, or how it is like that, and so on. Prabhu, could you please share, if you have a quick memory? I mean, just putting it out abruptly at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've been studying since childhood, but not enough, actually. I think devotees like you actually study Bhagavatam more than I did. The thing about it, the Bhagavatam, is that, like Prabhupada was mentioning in this purport, that it's beneficial for those who are neophyte, those who are on the path, those who are liberated. So it's beneficial both for the demons and the devotees. And you see that reading Srimad Bhagavatam, it captures the heart of everyone, be they demons, be they devotees. Even the demons, they are, they are attracted by Bhagavatam. They become calm or pacified by Bhagavatam. So this was my experience growing up, that it's just it's something that deeply, once we get into it and we get a taste for reading it, the hard part is getting into it. But once you get into it, and it's easy to get out of it, like easy to forget to read. But once we're into it, it's so it's like it's so relishable. It's like, which other book would you want to read? Like when I was doing my PhD, and my PhD was on the Bhagavatam, there's, the time came when you had to choose the topic, choose the topic. What topic do you want to do your PhD on? And there's so many topics. And even some very senior devotees, advanced devotees, told me do this or that, write something on Hinduism and bioethics, or, this or that. And I would pursue those, but everything would just become so dry. Finally, it's like, even if I wanted to, I couldn't do anything other than work on the Bhagavatam, because what else could be more important? And everything else seemed less important. Everything else seemed less relishable, less to the point. And this is why Prabhupada actually said, particularly of the Bhagavatam and the introduction, as you know very well, he said that this literature will cause a revolution in the lives of people. This literature will go in the schools, colleges, and universities. Because the Bhagavatam arose in the age of Kali to dissipate the darkness of ignorance. It was Krishna's incarnation for this age, to dissipate the darkness of ignorance. And no other literature arose for that reason. So therefore, in some ways, the Bhagavatam can do in this age what the Bhagavad-Gita cannot. The Bhagavatam can do in this age what the Upanishads cannot. The Bhagavatam can do in this age what all other Vedic literatures cannot, because this is Krishna's incarnation for the age of Kali. And in childhood, I didn't have a taste. I truly actually didn't have a taste for reading. And half the time I would read, it was just to make my mother happy. I knew she would get really, really angry if I didn't read. And so that was my only motivation. But then as I read, and I read more, and I read more, and I read more, then it turned around. I was reading because I wanted to read, because I had a taste for reading. And there started to come some taste. And my PhD also was one of the most, fun times in my life, because, nice time in my life. It's actually kind of difficult there, but it was very nice because of the Bhagavatam. It was like so nice to just small sections of the Bhagavatam were sometimes so like this verse here is so pacifying to the heart, so relieving. It like gives you answers to things that you're struggling in your life, to conflicts, to tensions, to problems. The Bhagavatam actually, especially in a family situation, we also deal with so much, difficulties. The Bhagavatam actually gives a solution to those difficult times that we go through. Yes.
Wonderful, Prabhu. One final thing is that we have like a number of devotees on this call. So I request all the devotees to wish well and pray that 1,108 sets from Naperville Temple will get strengthened and offered when for this 100,000 goal from the North America, whole world Bhagavatam leadership, Prabhu. So just want to ask all the devotees to pray and get prepared, and there is some hesitations, ask Bhagavatam for the clarification and so on. Thank you, Prabhu. That's it, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Hare Krishna. Well, by your enthusiasm, we will all get infected, and hopefully we'll help you in this. We'll help each other in this. Yes. Thank you, Prabhu. Any other comments, questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
Dandavad Pranam.
Prabhuji, thank you. Wonderful glorification today. You're always an inspiration to us in the community. Only one thing stood out. Your last comment about Bhagavad-Gita and Bhagavatam, you made a profound statement that only, even Bhagavad-Gita cannot do what Bhagavatam can do. I sort of agree, but I'm a little confused because it is Krishna who tells Arjuna. It's also in it's not really Kali Yuga, but at the edge of Kali Yuga. But he also says, like, Arjuna, go and declare this to the entire mankind. So I'm a little perplexed. Could you please expand on it, Prabhuji?
Yes. No, actually, I was afraid to make that comment because they're non-different. Bhagavad-Gita, Bhagavatam, they're all spiritual literature. And in fact, Prabhupada says very clearly, if there's just one book, that we can give to someone, like there's so many books Prabhupada wrote. If there's one book, then the Gita is the book. It's the book to because it's very concise. It's very there. So everything is non-different. Just like service to Krishna is all non-different. It's all absolute. It's all perfect, right? It's all perfect. Everything is perfect. But within that perfection, there's even more levels of intensity. So like all devotees of the Lord are equally perfect, but within that we say, oh, Madhurya Ras is even more perfect, right? So in the same way, Prabhupada also said that the knowledge of the Bhagavatam is even more deeper. It is even more expansive than the Bhagavad-Gita. And Prabhupada compared Bhagavad-Gita to the bachelors, Srimad-Bhagavatam to the masters, and Chaitanya Charitamrita to the PhD. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in one place he says how Chaitanya Charitamrita is the most important literature. Next is Bhagavatam, and next is Gita. So these are all just, you could say, this is also rasa. This is not speaking in terms of truth or in terms of, like logic. It's more about aesthetics, more about rasa, more about feeling. That the Bhagavatam, the Gita doesn't get into the sweet relationship between the devotee and the Lord to that degree that the Bhagavatam does. And the Bhagavatam has arisen specifically for the age of Kali. When all else failed, the sages were feeling hopeless about this age. Like everything is so bad about this age. And they could see that. Like there's nothing good that's left. Nothing good. Every type of value, every type of moral, anything good in this world is being questioned, is being destroyed. On the plane coming here, there's these movies on the plane. So there's this, next, the big screen. So next to this passengers watching these movies. And I could just see, like, within 10 minutes, everything that people value, even in the material sense, was being destroyed in those 10 minutes. Any type of morality, any type of ethics, it was being made fun of, destroyed, and like that. So nothing is good in this age, and the Bhagavatam has come to change the wave. So this is the Bhagavatam itself that says it. It's arisen for this reason. And by this time, Vyasadeva had already written the Bhagavad-Gita and the Mahabharata, and the Gita is part of it. But still, he was not feeling satisfied, because the Gita's message is there, but it was not explained. How do we surrender to Krishna? How does the devotee? We need examples, because in this age of Kali, we're so dull-headed. Krishna says, surrender unto me. Krishna says, he lists the qualities of a devotee. But how does the devotee actually live that life? That's not being explained. And that's explained in the Bhagavatam. And therefore, the Bhagavatam is Nigamakalpataro. It's the highest literature. It's because for us, not because the Gita is less, but for us, it's the highest literature because we need it spelled out. And the Bhagavatam does that for us. Does that help, Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Thank you so much. It's such a fine line of difference, and without knowing it, going out and talking, like, first of all, it is needed for me to internalize, and then when I speak to others also, I need to be careful. So thank you so much, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you so much. Yes, a good comment, question. Yes.
Oh, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Dandavad Pranam. All glories to you. But Prabhu, I cannot, I don't know what to say, but I feel I am very fortunate to have your association, because from your by birth, you're in Srimad-Bhagavatam, and the way you speak, I can understand that how much you have that feeling for your feeling, experience that feeling. That's why it was a nectarian flow on whatever you explained. And a couple things I was thinking about, even say, suppose if I read Bhagavatam, I don't have that feeling. That means when I was linking with the distribution, if you don't have the feeling, then better do it than get the feeling. Like Vamshidhari Prabhu, of course, he has that feeling and also doing. I may only talk, but I don't do. So how do we differentiate between a doing and feeling? Is my thought process how to get there. I'm not like you. I'm not like the people like who are involved. Like Vamshidhari Prabhu is in Bhagavatam, always in the Bhagavatam. I just hear and there, and then say, okay, it's nice class. I feel something, okay. But what is that difference of feeling and doing? Since you have that experience, because you also mentioned that Narsingacharya, when he came to Oxford, he said Bhagavatam is the best. And I heard that he was in tears when he said that Srimad-Bhagavatam is the best. Yeah, I heard from your brother.
I see.
Yeah.
Yes. Actually, my brother had a lot more association with him for a much longer time.
Yes.
Yes. And he was Narsingacharya was such that he would just compose verses on the spot. I forgot to mention this. This is why he's the world's best Sanskritist, because someone's birthday was there and he would compose a verse about that person, just like as though it's like a 2,000-year-old verse. Yes.
Prabhu, this one I'll tell you one thing, right? There's people who are worshippers of Lakshmi Hayagriva. They're not because even Saraswati, goddess Saraswati, gets the knowledge from Hayagriva. That's why there is a verse in Sri Vaishnavas, when you have to have the knowledge, they always say, even they teach the children that Gnananandamayam Devam Nirmalam Spidikakratim Adharam Sarva Vidyanam Hayagrivam Upasmaya. This is the verse all Sri Vaishnavas teaches the children, even if you start reading any book for that matter. So that was the Narsingacharya, and he can frame anything. When it comes to Srimad-Bhagavatam, he was in tears.
Yes.
Anyway.
Yes. And he also had to admit, he said, yeah, the Bhagavatam says Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So he was a Sri Vaishnava, but he said, yeah, Krishna is also, non-different than Vishnu. He was very careful on that because he knew that in the Bhagavatam it says Krishnastu Bhagavan Swayam. So Krishna is Bhagavan Swayam. Yes. But this point regarding the feeling, the taste, Prabhu, when I was reading, when we read Bhagavatam initially from Canto 1, Chapter 1, and we start reading through, then the Bhagavatam appears to us to be somewhat boring, as and many people here may have children, and they may also be thinking how, youth, how to get them into it. So this very nice point that you read, how to get that taste, the feeling for the Bhagavatam. So by reading it sequentially from the beginning, that's the proper way. Like Prabhupada is saying, we read from the beginning, but it can feel somewhat boring for people. But my own kind of revolution in the Bhagavatam happened when, then if you take some pastime, some particular story, where like in the 4th canto, the pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, we know the basic pastime of Dhruva Maharaj, but when we read in the Bhagavatam, we actually understand how deep it is, how disturbed Dhruva Maharaj was, and what he did and how he approached it to completely transform the situation. His mother tells Dhruva Maharaj, he tells him, he says, don't be resentful of anyone. Don't be envious of anyone. Why? Because whatever a person achieves in this world, they do so because they please the Lord. Your great-grandfather Brahma became Brahma because he pleased the Lord. Your grandfather Swayambhuva Manu became Manu because he pleased the Lord. Your father Uttanapad became king because he pleased the Lord. So if you also please the Lord, then you can get whatever you like. And then when he's going, then he says, okay, I'll go to the forest. Then his mother says, you go and you worship the Lord, but first give up your bad feelings towards your brother. Because if you go with this bad feeling, then you won't find the Lord. You'll come in the way. So just small nuances like this are so special. So yes, sequentially reading is important, but if we find a pastime, everyone likes to read stories. Philosophy is hard, but if there's a person involved, and we submerge ourselves in the narration of that devotee that may be of a particular liking to us, then we start to feel it. Then we start to feel and really take those instructions to heart and apply those in our life. And we try to imbibe the mood and character of that devotee. And for me, that's where Bhagavatam becomes very relishable. For another person, when we all have our special people, and we can just read that narration. Another person is Bali Maharaj. His life is so inspiring. How he surrenders himself to Krishna. Third one is Prahlad Maharaj. Goes through every type of suffering, yet is so fixed on his meditation on the Lord. Prabhupada actually says, particularly of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj, he says that by reading these narrations in the section of Dhruva Maharaj, he says, even spiritual feelings can develop even in the heart of a neophyte. The determination to serve the Lord will develop even in the heart of a neophyte, he says, by reading this. And it's mentioned in the Chaitanya Bhagavat, I think maybe, that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu heard the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj hundreds of times as a child. Because in the whole Bhagavatam, especially these two are most instructive for devotees, for sadhakas. And we also see that Prabhupada, he spent excessive time on discussing the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, on describing the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj. So even though the whole Bhagavatam is there, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu particularly heard the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj hundreds of times, more than the other sections, right? So in the same way, so that means it is to some degree bona fide. In the same way, we can take certain pastimes and deeply dive in them. Because the Bhagavatam as a whole is almost too vast, right? We feel a sense of kind of overwhelmed. We feel overwhelmed by seeing this, encyclopedia in front of us. And so this is the way I think, to dive into, is not to, just one section of the Bhagavatam. Also, the story of Ajamil is there. The pastimes of Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami, they're there. So whatever section inspires us, we dive deep into it and get a taste. And then we can share that with others. Then, when we're distributing Bhagavatam, like you were saying, we can just refer to that story or that pastime, or we can remember that pastime that helped us, particularly in our life, at a certain time, to get over something, to pass through a difficult time. And so the Bhagavatam can be read in sections, it can be read topically also. I feel it can be very beneficial that way, especially for like teenagers and people who cannot, read a lot of philosophy.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
But if you have a taste, you're just being humble, Prabhu. You're also very humble. So this is just preaching to the choir. You already have a taste.
No. I'm just posing myself to be humble. That's all. Nothing much.
Yeah.
It's inside empty, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
No, Prabhu. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, please accept my humble obeisances. All glories to Guru Maharaj Srila Prabhupada. A very wonderful class, Prabhu. I mean, that one verse, and it can go, at such length and breadth. What I want to ask is, Prabhu, sometime can we get some illumination on your thesis work? The Maya, one or two lectures, maybe you can share a little bit of your findings. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Saji. Actually, that book I wrote for you could say non-devotees. The philosophy in that book is probably very novice for devotees. But the Bhagavatam is also wonderful. So it's also coming from the Bhagavatam. I mean, discussing the Bhagavatam. So, but it's available on Amazon if anyone would like it. Maya in the Bhagavad Purana. Yes. Thank you.
Is it going to help the non-devotees take a fresh look at Bhagavatam? Will it help them? Yeah.
Yes, Mataji, that's actually something, that's the purpose. Because as Prabhupada was mentioning this purport, I forgot to mention that point, that the Bhagavatam historically has been misunderstood because they haven't heard it from the devotee Srila Prabhupada and Prabhupada's movement, so to say. And so Bhagavatam has been either understood by people to be a central book, the story of Krishna and the gopis. And those who are after sensual pleasure, they have misused it to describe Rasa Leela and talk about the gopis and imitate Radha and Krishna. Or on the other side, you have the moralists like Ram Mohan Roy, Vivekananda, who are very philosophical moralists. And these persons, they didn't understand the deep message of the Bhagavatam, how this is spiritual love, spiritual rasa. And so they rejected the Bhagavatam because they said, oh, it's an immoral text. And there's actually a quote in Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books that I quote in my book about Bhaktivinoda Thakur mentioning this, that how he has this very, I can read it for you actually, the very, how the British scholar is coming to India and despising the Bhagavatam because they think, oh, it's such an immoral book. God is dancing with the wives of other people. So for so many generations, the Bhagavatam has been lost because it's been misunderstood. It's been lost to people. They've missed it. So the idea is that many devotees now are trying to write books on the Bhagavatam in the academic circle so that Bhagavatam studies can be revived, so that people can actually understand the true message of the Bhagavatam as presented by Srila Prabhupada. And because the Bhagavatam gives the most amazing theology, like the highest knowledge when properly understood, the Bhagavatam becomes a challenge to all the world's religions, to everyone, because theologically speaking, it's the most deep. Like one can, just in comparative theology, one can compare theological principles, and the Bhagavatam is giving us that knowledge which no other book is able to give us. So yeah, that is the whole idea, that we want to bring the Bhagavatam back into the academic circles, bring it into the schools and colleges. The subtitle of my book is, so it's Maya in the Bhagavad Purana, Human Suffering and Divine Play. So the Mayavadis, a third group that has misinterpreted the Bhagavatam, the Mayavadis say that Maya is all illusion, and therefore the world is illusion, and therefore even the Bhagavatam is telling us that the world is illusion, because they misinterpret this word Maya. And what they missed is that the Bhagavatam uses Maya not as illusion, but as the energy of the Lord. It's something very real. And one aspect of that energy is that it puts us into illusion. Maya itself is not illusion, but it puts us into illusion by its elusive powers. And that is called human suffering. So Maya causes suffering in this world. That's one role of Maya. But Maya itself, and Prabhupada says this in the introduction to the 10th canto, he says, Maya itself is just Krishna's energy. It's spiritual. And the other sense of Maya, of that energy, therefore it's so pure, it's so wonderful, is that it puts the liberated souls also in a spiritual bewilderment. And in that aspect, it acts as Yoga Maya, where Yoga Maya is Krishna's spiritual energy, also elusive, also bewildering. But then that bewilderment has the effect that the devotee wants. It's a voluntary bewilderment, where the devotee falls into Maya, so to say, Yoga Maya, to forget Krishna's majesty and to love Krishna as their son or daughter, their son or lover, like that. So it's the same energy, Prabhupada says. It's not like there's a material Maya or spiritual Maya. It's just Krishna's energy. But in the material sense, it becomes Mahamaya. It becomes a source of pain. But in the spiritual sense, it's Yoga Maya. And it's meant to increase our love for Krishna.
Thank you very much, Prabhu. Even that is a very big, good glimpse. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Just one more this thing. It's interesting that you mentioned Rajaram Mohan Roy. He has been falsely hoisted as a reformer, whereas he's been mainly the one single biggest reason why Sanskrit declined in India, and then hoisting on stuff like sati, which was never a social custom. We don't have it in our histories other than a couple of mentions in the Puranas. But they use, particularly he and the British use these sort of things to, like you rightly said, bring down not only Bhagavatam, but the entire Hindu thing. Maybe this is not a topic here, but we need to identify the asuras and be careful, even though they come dressed as,
Yes.
yeah, sweet honey, like Putna or whoever it is.
Yes. No, actually, that's his Bhaktivinoda Thakur was living in that time. And that's why his works are so important. He responds to them. He responds to the British who are trying to undermine Vedic culture and the Bhagavatam. He responds to the Indian reformists. And his books are a treasure house, and they're very applicable today also, because they're written in a very scientific way. Like in one place, Bhaktivinoda Thakur says, okay, let's accept that the Bhagavatam is just 1,000 years old. Because at that time, the British were saying it's not 5,000, it's just 1,000 years old. Let's accept that, it's been changed over time, and it's it's not, it's developed. They say it's a book that's developed over time. It's not, written in one form in the beginning. Let's accept all these things you're saying. But now look at the philosophy and tell me, is there a philosophy, is there a theology that you find that is as good as this one? And the answer will be, you won't find anything better. So he says, forget the history and what you think. I agree with all of you. Fine, we accept whatever you're saying. But can you compete with its theology? So yes.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. And something you did right now was, I exclusively focused on Srila Prabhupada's books and other things, but maybe I'll start looking into Bhaktivinoda Thakur's books also. Hopefully I'll find enough time and intelligence, or come to somebody like you to understand them. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining the call and for your association. Srimad-Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai.